What's up, my comic comrades? We are back at it today with another Origin of episode. This time, we're talking about one of the coolest characters the Valiant universe has to offer. Shadowman. For those of you who are not familiar with Valiant Comics, they're the publisher responsible for awesome characters like Bloodshot, Exo-Man of War, Ninjak, and of course, Shadowman. They're the third largest superhero universe. Actually, if you're wanting to get into superhero comics, but Marvel and DC seem way too confusing as there's tons of reboots and different iterations of the same character, well, the Valiant universe is a perfect way to start. They do have a good amount of characters, but it's a lot more self-contained and not nearly as vast or confusing as DC and Marvel, who has been around for 60 plus years with, again, tons of reboots and changes to continuity. But that's just my bit of comic book advice. As for today, let's start talking about one of Valiant's coolest characters, Shadowman. Jack Boniface, the man who would become Shadowman, first appeared in Exo-Man of War issue 4 in May of 1992. He would first appear as Shadowman in Shadowman issue 1 in May of 1992. He was created by Marvel legend Jim Shooter along with Steve Englehart and Mike Manley. Shadowman is a lineage or mantle kind of like Dr. Fate, as more than one person has been Shadowman over the years, like Michael Leroy. But the main Shadowman, or the most consistent Shadowman in comics over the years, has been Jack Boniface. Jack was a jazz player who eventually became empowered by a mysterious organization called the Coven. The Coven is a group of people who practice the mystic arts and or voodoo. Their main purpose was to rid the world from Master Dark. Master Dark was a 19th century necromancer, aka a 19th century evil wizard. In any case, in order to combat this evil, the Coven or Coven created the Shadowman. They then imbued Jack with said power and put a spell on this hero of the dark that made him immune to the harm from Master Dark's black magic. And we find most of this out in Shadowman issue 17. Like a lot of comic book origins, we usually don't get all the details right away, and that proved true for Shadowman. Anyway, in this issue, Jack finds out that his housekeeper, Nettie, is way more than a housekeeper. She's in fact the head of a voodoo cult. And like I just said, her cult, the Coven or Coven, created Shadowman and gave him the power to fight Master Dark. Now, I do want to say that Shadowman looked very different back in the early 90s. Like many comic book characters, their look evolves over the years, and that was definitely the case for Shadowman. Because let's face it, his costume wasn't the greatest during his first run, but when Valiant Comics was revitalized back in 2012, he got an awesome updated look. It's in his 2012 series that we got an updated Shadowman origin as well. They also reveal that the Shadowman power or mantle is a lineage. We find out that Jack's father, Josiah Boniface, was also a Shadowman. Unfortunately, his father died sacrificing himself to defeat Master Dark, but before his death, Josiah left a talisman to his pregnant wife Helena that would protect their child against the dead. Several years later, Jack is now working at the New Orleans Museum of Culture, and we see that he wears the talisman his mother gave him. We then see Jack meeting up with a private investigator named James Burke, and we find out Jack is trying to learn more about his parents. When he sees the records the private investigator gave him, he sees that it says both his parents were criminals. Needless to say, this makes Jack very angry, and he ends up having a flashback about his mother telling him how his father was a good man. Believing she had been lying to him about his father all these years, he gets pissed off, tears off the talisman, and throws it into a river. But the problem is, now that he's no longer wearing the talisman around his neck, evil creatures can now sense him. One of these being the newly formed demon, Mr. Twist, who works for Dark. Said demon then sends police officers, who are possessed, mind you, to arrest Jack. They then put him in the back of their squad car, take him to the city's outskirts, and shoot him in the back. But when they shoot him in the back, a shadow spirit appears and says, "Yes, the amulet hid you for so long, host. So long, apart we are lost. Son of Marius, son of Julian, son of Maxim. Together we are found, son of Michael, son of Josiah. Together we are one." If I didn't know better, I would have thought this was the Venom symbiote. In any case, on the next page, we see Jack transform, saying, "I am not something you see every day. I am the last thing you'll ever see. I am Shadowman." And this, my friends, is his modern origin, which I think is pretty dope. But you see what I'm talking about, how we find out that the Shadowman is a lineage, as the spirit was literally mentioning all of Jack's fathers before him who were also Shadowman. Pretty cool stuff. The 2012 Shadowman run is really good. I definitely recommend that, especially if you're into mystic arts and voodoo type characters. I also dig how it's set within New Orleans. I love the city's whole vibe and culture. New Orleans is pretty dope. Anyway, let's talk about Shadowman's powers and abilities briefly. Shadowman is based in voodoo and or the mystic arts. So he possesses paranormal super strength, increased stamina and endurance, as well as super agility and reflexes. Shadowman also has night vision, being able to see perfectly in the dark, as well as a healing factor and gliding abilities. Comparatively speaking, he's pretty much Valiant's brother Voodoo, which means he's incredibly powerful and badass. Definitely a character you should check out, so here's some reading recommendations to do so. Read the 1992 original Shadowman series, Shadowman Volume 1 Birthrights, Shadowman Volume 2 Dead and Gone, Shadowman Volume 3 Rag and Bone, and Shadowman Volume 1 from 2018. All of that should be enough to get you all started. And just like that, my comic comrades, that brings today's episode to a close. But if you enjoyed today's Valiant themed episode, be sure to check out our History of Bloodshot episode right here. And if you like our channel, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. It always helps us out. But I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things comics.